Good evening and welcome to the Mount Olive Township Workshop and Council meeting for January 30th, 2018. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence for all the men and women that serve and protect us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Michelle, would you read the Open Public Meetings Act, please?
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Here.
Mrs. Ferrante?
Mr.
Here.
Mr. Ferrante?
My wife's not here.
Mrs. is not here.
Them.
Mrs. Laybow?
Don't you mean Mr.?
I'll switch it. Mr. Laybow?
Here.
Mr. Mania? Mr. Stewart?
Here.
Mr. Roman?
Here.
Mr. Nicastro?
Here. Thank you. Mayor, you have a guest to introduce?
Yes,
My
I would
wife's
like to
here?
introduce Robert Brauman, who is here in the effort to get his communications badge on his way to his Eagle Scout award. And we're very happy, as we always are, anytime we have a Boy Scout up here who's moving towards Eagle Scout. From speaking to Robert, I think he's 2 badges short of where he needs to, or 1 badge, 2 badges? 2 badges short, and then his project, and ultimately let the record reflect that I will attend Robert's Eagle Scout presentation when the time comes, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of us that we're very proud of him, as we are of all the other Eagle Scouts in Mount Olive. But we're very fortunate to have a very active troop system, and as always, there's nothing more that a young man can accomplish of greater significance than achieving his Eagle Scout. So anytime that we have the opportunity to bring someone up here, we take advantage of it, let him participate as the same way that we all participate in Mount Olive government. So congratulations to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome, Robert. We have, first item, we have 10 resolutions,
We're removing number 5.
with 5 being removed. So we have 9 resolutions. Does anyone have any questions or anything? Mr. Roman?
On the number 4, the memorandum of understanding with the soccer club. In that memorandum, I do see that there's language there about making it available for the use of other entities along with the soccer club, that they will make concerted effort. Was it your understanding when this memorandum was drafted that they, going forward, they will make assurances that when they're not in use, that any other organization, especially a recreation, will be able to use it? And for how long do we expect this construction memorandum of understanding to be enforceable?
Well, the original memorandum was back in, I believe, 2002 or 3, which was for 23 years at that point. So once the original memorandum expires is when we'll renew all these at the same time. So it's not an additional agreement added onto that one. It's just amending that one, and then we'll renew all of them when that original term expires.
It's a significant contribution from the soccer club.
I agree.
To the tune of several hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can tell you that the soccer club, which, if you know anything about soccer, basically runs at least 10 months out of the year, so that while the memorandum of understanding talks about use by other entities, individuals, and the like, soccer club gets priority scheduling rights over the fields based upon the contribution, the improvements, not just on the field which we're talking about, but on all of the soccer fields. The memorandum of understanding covers fields 1 through 4. There are numerous fields beyond 1 through 4, which the soccer club also has not only developed, but continues to not only maintain, but improve as we go forward through funds that have nothing to do with tax dollars that are collected. The soccer club has, for years and years and years, made the fields available not only to individuals, to recreation, to other clubs that where the fields are not being used by soccer. So They have been nothing but a great citizen of the Township of Mount Olive, looking to improve our facilities. We have been fortunate to partner with them. In the past, we have been able to improve fields without spending tax dollars. This is a joint effort between the municipality and the soccer club, in this instance to turf field number 2, which will inure to the benefit of all residents in Mount Olive. So the answer to your question, Alex, is that if you go up to the soccer fields, whether it's field number 4, which is currently turfed, which have been paid completely by soccer, or you look at any of the other fields, when they're not in use by the soccer club, they are continually in use by the residents of Mount Olive and by individuals who are not residents of Mount Olive. And soccer continues to pour thousands and thousands of dollars into maintaining those fields for the benefit of not only Mount Olive Township residents, but also through Green Acres to all residents of the state of New Jersey and beyond.
Thank you for making those assurances that, seeing as the township will be contributing half the cost to this field, that the rest of the residents will be able to benefit from that part. Thank you.
I can tell you that without any hesitation, that the fields will be used by residents outside of the soccer club on a regular basis. But the priority will be scheduling by the soccer club during, obviously, Saturdays and Sundays when they run their actual leagues and practices.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on the resolutions?
I just want to make a comment on resolution number 7. The new tax law that came in created a slurry of activity, and I'm glad that we are able to respond in a positive manner for those residents that prepaid their taxes, because I know some people prepaid them without understanding the mechanism by which that could happen, so I'm glad to see that was put in place.
Thank you. If I may comment on that as well, had significant discussions with the finance office and the hardships that would be placed on that office through having to reimburse those taxpayers who might have misunderstood what was going on and had prepaid taxes where they were not getting the benefit of the federal tax law. After discussion with the finance office and my certainly input that we work for the taxpayers and we had to find a way where taxpayers wanted reimbursement of taxes that were prepaid and not to their benefit, this has been put in place to be able to accommodate those taxpayers, and we will find a way to reimburse the taxpayers that didn't understand the tax law.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on resolutions? Does anyone have anything else? Seeing none, we have one ordinance for first reading. Does anyone have any questions on the first reading or the 2 ordinances for second reading?
Chuck is in the audience if anyone has a question for first reading on number 1, the first reading ordinance, changing the land use law.
Anyone have any questions or concerns on that, or we're okay? Seems like we got that. Yeah, there was 3 other ordinances.
I don't know whether or not you want to have, Chuck is here, if you
Yeah.
have any comment on the ordinance which is on the,
Yeah, please.
If you'd like, yep.
Good evening, members of council, mayor. The ordinance is actually one of the implementation requirements after we had the settlement agreement and the planning board adopted the housing element and fair share plan, which then you as the council and mayor have endorsed. So this ordinance actually updates an ordinance that's been on the books here in Mount Olive for a number of years. It deals with all of the intricacies of how affordable housing is implemented. And I'm sure you don't want to go into all of the details, but essentially it keeps us current with the rules, and it has been reviewed by the court-appointed special master, who was satisfied with the language and the structure of the ordinance. He has submitted it. He will be submitting his report to the judge, and then Mr. Semru or his colleague will be in court on March 16th, we expect, for the final compliance hearing. I will be back again at your next meeting. We have one final step to implement at that point, which is what's known as a spending plan, but we'll talk about that at that time. But this ordinance is really, it is essential, is required, and we spent time on it to make sure we have all the details in place.
Once again, I commend your efforts on behalf of Mount Olive Township staying ahead of the curve. I know that the courts have recognized that Mount Olive Township has met its obligations through various rounds of affordable housing, and I'm sure that the court is appreciative of the fact that we've come to a resolution with the powers that be to fulfill our obligations in round 3.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The judge was very complimentary towards the township, actually, for your for the efforts for the township over the years. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any old business? Seeing none, does anybody have any new business? Seeing none, does anyone from the public wish to be heard at this time, or none at this time? You want to see right now, Joe? Okay, this is the first part? Okay.
This is part 1.
Part 1.
Joe Fleischner, Chairman of the Environmental Committee. I'm here on behalf of the Environmental Commission. They raised some issues at our last meeting and asked me to come before the council. They would like, when I say they, the committee, would like a report from the town on the current status of Comeville North. Because members of the committee have been approached by different citizens around the town with regard to the former dump, so they would like a status.
Let me respond to that, if I will.
Well, I'm just.
I understand. I can respond to that in terms of substantive information.
Okay, great.
And I leave the formal response to Andrew to provide, but I can give you what I know about what's happening at Comeville North, and perhaps Chuck may have some information as well. Ultimately, the problems from our perspective of Comeville North have been a breach of the cap, which allowed for water infiltration into the cap, which led to leachate leaving the site and infecting wells on Ringenbach Lane and associated areas. Through a partnership with the Department of Environmental Protection, with the township laying out over $1 million, water, those wells that were infected actually have been, I should say, will be connected to the township water systems based upon the direction of the DEP, which is ultimately footing the bill for the costs associated. There's been significant progress with all of the residents in the affected area being certainly educated and communicated with on a regular basis. And I expect that any of the affected properties from the landfill will be connected to city water within the next 2 months. I don't have any specifics in terms of the schedule, and I would suggest that Andrew provide that information to the Environmental Commission at the appropriate time. But I can tell you that there has been significant progress through the winter months to actually make sure that those residents who have been directly affected by the landfill be connected to city water. Secondly, we have been in the process of negotiating with the DEP in terms of being able to utilize the landfill for solar power generation. That effort would not only create a benefit to the township in terms of revenue to the tune of $300,000 to $400,000 per year, but would also result in the cap being totally fixed, so that ultimately there would be no further water infiltration into the cap, resulting in the leachate. Win-win for the township. We're currently in negotiations with the DEP. We haven't been able to finalize in terms of who's ultimately going to be responsible for further remediation of the landfill. As you know, we're not responsible for the capping of the landfill, but we obviously have the interests of the Mount Olive residents at heart. So we continue to move forward on both fronts. Number one, fixing the water problem, which I expect, as I said, within the next 2 months to be resolved. And number two, looking for a resolution of the problem with the cap of the landfill, which ultimately, hopefully, will result in revenue to the township. So that's, from my perspective, that's where we're at with the landfill. And it's something which is very important to the administration.
Thank you. And just a little side note for the administration, as long as they don't drill down more than 15 to 18 feet, they'll be fine.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you, because at one point we had looked at different uses of the landfill, and I don't think that the solar generation will create additional problems. But there are many issues involved in taking over the landfill. We don't currently own the landfill. We're one step short of actually foreclosing on the landfill. We obviously have concerns about future remediation costs associated with the landfill, and that's really what the DEP negotiations are about at this point. Who's going to be responsible? What are we going to be able to do there? And really, at the end of the day, solar generation was probably the only real use that could be done at that site without actually drilling down into the cap. So appreciate that, and I think we're on the same page that
I'm sure we are.
we don't intend on creating additional problems at the landfill. And if we can make some money out of it at the end of the day, so much better for the town and for the environment as well.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to my number 5 here from the committee. The committee would like to know if there is or will ever be a plan to bring public water to the houses that are around the lake. Because they do have sewers, but they don't have water, and many of their wells are very shallow wells. So that's, the committee would like to know if there's ever a thought to bring water, city water, to that area.
Let me address that really quickly. I don't know the answer to that question, but Tim is here. Tim, if you could come up. The one thing I can tell you from having been involved in the Planning Board and the Environmental Commission over 20 years that I've been involved in Mount Olive is that the depth of a well is not necessarily indicative of really anything. It's not indicative of a well running dry with additional development. There are many different aquifers which really are based upon many different factors in terms of how they react to development, to pollution, to earth shifts, whatever is involved in terms of aquifers. It's really a science which is well beyond my education. But with respect to whether or not we can extend water to different areas, I'd leave that to Tim if he has some information.
Just a little bit. We have had recently conversations on that issue, talking about the different wells in the area and what we can run where. Obviously, water allocation and well supply is an issue, supplying any area with water. But we've kind of looked at Village Green and Pinecrest area, which surrounds the Old Bud Lake section, and very crude conversations of the possibility of maybe moving something into that area. So nothing towards engineering or anything firm has been discussed, but it's been ideas that we've been throwing around to see if it's a possibility.
Water allocation to areas which are not currently serviced is governed by the Department of Environmental Protection?
The DEP?
Yes.
Yes.
And if you could just briefly go over what we're doing to actually interconnect the different water systems currently to give us the best possible water coverage throughout the township. I know you told us at the last meeting.
Yes, currently what we try to do is we're trying to interconnect, let me move this so I can talk to people too. We try to interconnect the, we have probably about 8 different water systems throughout the township. We like to interconnect the systems to combine them to make one larger water system. Currently what we've done so far is we've taken the Tins water system by Tins School, the Morris Chase water system over by Turkey Brook Park. They have been interconnected with the Linwood system, and we're now looking to bring water into Pershing Estates through the Pinecrest system, which is Outlook Park. That will put all those wells under one water allocation, and it will be looked at as one unit. The biggest part of all that is we always have backup for different systems. If one system goes down, open the interconnection, we have water flowing to the others. A few other systems are a little more difficult because there are not surrounding systems by them, as we're going to talk about the Indian Springs well in a little bit. There's nothing else around that to support it. So the ones that we're working on are on top of the hill, and it's just a big plus for the township and the residents, and it does allow additional water supply to go to dry areas such as Pershing Estates.
So if I may, Joe, the answer as I see it is that we continually try to give as much flexibility in terms of our water system, in terms of redundancies, in terms of supply. And I can tell you as I sit here, it is to the township's benefit to be able to supply city water to as many different areas of town as we can. However, having said that, I can tell you, having been involved in mental government for the past approximately 20 years, not all residents want to abandon their wells and go to city water, because obviously there's an expense involved that they don't currently incur. So we really look at what we can do as compared to what different areas of town want to have happen. As far as I'm concerned, any area that we can extend city water to, I am more than happy to do that. It works to the benefit of all of the residents in Mount Olive who are currently connected to city water.
So I was going to say this to the public portion, but I will step back as chairperson since Tim is here, and he does a great job. He
Well, thank you.
really does. So here's a question that my neighbors and I have, and maybe the attorney is going to have to answer this. When I bought my house and my neighbor's 44 years ago,
Time to move to Florida, Joe.
I can't get a 6-year-old off the school bus 3 or 4 days a week.
Joe, just move closer to the mic, please.
In the-
Thank you.
Sorry, Michelle.
That's okay.
We paid because the town directed the builder to put in sewer lines and water lines, as well as fire hydrants. The township required him to do it. He didn't pay for it. We, as the home buyers, paid for it. So my question, as my neighbors have come to me and asked, if our septic fails or our well fails, and we can show that we've maintained everything, is the town going to be responsible since they made the builder put in the sewer lines and the water lines, which we then had to pay for? Now, I know what you're saying, Mr. Mayor. It would be great if, but we didn't ask for it. We were told we had to do it.
Well, first, I want to say it sounds like a textbook bar exam question. It's very
Maybe.
But you know, I would say to you that there's factors such as the fact that right now it's not available. The lines are, like you said, they may have been in, but unless that the actual active line is there for a connection, I would say that would not be the town's responsibility. You know, then that's the rest of that is whatever occurred back then was a decision made. That if in the event it ever does go forward, you'll be ahead of the curve to some extent because some of the infrastructure's in, but the township really doesn't have the obligation under those circumstances.
Even though we could not move into our house or buy our house unless we paid for that line.
Well, that must have been a condition somewhere with respect to the development for future reference.
And the township, I can tell you, when we came to the mayor at that time and asked, because I've been here 44
Yeah, you know,
years.
if-
And we were told, you have no choice, those lines have to go in. So that's the only reason why I
You're not
question.
paying for the
Abraham
system
Lincoln
right
mayor
now.
back
No, but you weren't.
You're not necessarily paying the maintenance or for the capital of the
Well,
system.
that's another problem
Right.
we have now in the neighborhood, and Tim knows, because all those sewer covers are now sinking below the street.
Yeah, we have that problem.
Tim knows.
We have that problem throughout the township in terms of compaction. But the one thing I can tell you, I can't answer the legal question, but what I can tell you, Joe, based upon my knowledge, is that the township is not permitted to extend sewer service area beyond that which is permitted by the DEP. So based upon what Fred had said in terms of what the developer charged you for the infrastructure improvement at the time that you moved in, and whether or not it went through the planning board at the time, which required that it went in.
Yes, it
The
did.
bottom line is that you haven't been paying EDUs to dispose of your waste.
I'm not
I
arguing
understand,
that.
and I can tell you that if your septic fails and you're not within the sewer service area, you're not getting sewer service, and it has nothing to do with the township. It's a statewide thing that has been imposed in terms of where sewer systems can ultimately be installed.
However,
Yeah.
when the requirements were put in, the Highlands did not exist. The planning board at that time required the developer to put that in. The township agreed that the developer had to put that in, and the township was the driving force behind that. That was over 20 years ago. And I understand that, but I just raised that as a thought to keep in mind, because I can also tell you, I don't have gas. I called Elizabethtown Gas.
You moved away pretty quick.
And we were told $26,000 a house if we want a gas line drawn. And they can't do it anyway, because I know what the law is. We're in the preservation of the Highlands. They still couldn't put it in. But it's an issue that my neighbors have asked. So I wanted to share it with you. Now I'd like to just go back to what the environmental committee has.
Yes, that was personal.
That was personal, so I stepped away. But this gentleman, for the record, does an excellent job. And anytime we've had sewer covers that have sunk below the road, he knows, and he gets people up there as soon as they can, so that, although it does slow the cars down, which is a pretty good thing, actually. But anyway, I'm going to jump back up to environmental committee. Number 2, mining district. Are you all aware there's a mining district in town? No? Have you ever been to the mining district? No. I would suggest, the environmental committee suggests, that you take a drive to the mining district, because there will be an application before the planning board, of which I'm not on now, but they did come once before to build a concrete plant in the mining district.
You're talking back off of Waterloo Valley Road?
Yeah, way up there, but that's the mining district. I would just suggest, and I would suggest if you have a Jeep, use the Jeep to go there, or Subaru Outback that's higher off the ground. But as council people, I would suggest that you go to the mining district and see what's there. Master Plan Committee. If there ever is another Master Plan Committee put together for review, members of the Environmental Committee would like to see a member on that committee.
I will make sure that there is a member of the Environmental Committee on the.
Okay, redevelopment plan for the area. Chuck and I have actually talked a little about that.
For which area? Around the lake?
Around the lake.
Yeah.
The Environmental Committee would like to know what the status and the timetable is, so if you could just forward that to the committee, and they'll be happy.
I was discussing that today with my staff. Obviously, Howie Weiss is running that committee, and I expect that there will be a meeting late in February. I think the last date that I saw was perhaps February the 21st at about 8:15, but we'll certainly let the Environmental Committee know, and certainly Kathy Murphy will be a large part of that committee.
And Kathy is our vice chairman of the committee.
Kathy is the Open Space Environmental Committee guru in Mount Olive Township, so she will certainly be notified and can let everyone else on the committee know at the same time.
But if, you know,
I think February 21 at 8:15 was the last date and time that I saw.
as long as they're notified.
Everyone will be notified.
They just want to make sure.
It's an ad hoc.
No, I understand. Howie and I have spoken.
Yes, and it's made up of residents, so there'll be plenty of advertising, and I'll make sure that the environmental and open space committees are aware of the date and time, well in advance.
That's it from the environmental committee, but please go to the mining district. You will be enlightened. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Does anyone else from the public wish to be heard at this time? Seeing none, close to the public. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Open the Mount Olive Township Council meeting for, where are we? January 30th, 2018. Michelle, would you read the Open Public Meetings Act, please?
According to Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Here.
Mr. Ferrante.
Here.
Mrs. Labow.
Here.
Mr. Mania. Mr. Stewart.
Here.
Mr. Roman.
Here.
Mr. Nacastro.
Here. Mr. Amianda, would you approve the minutes from the December 19th meeting, 2017 workshop? There was a correction noted.
Yes, Mr. President.
And the other, January 2nd and January 16th.
I make a motion for approval of minutes of previous meetings on December 19, 2017, public meeting, and then January 2nd, 2018, reorganization meeting, and January 16, 2018, work session and public meeting.
Second.
Correction on December 19th is a workshop, not a public meeting.
Right.
Correct.
That's what Joe had said.
Yep. Thank you. Any questions on it? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Labau?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro? Mr. Nacastro?
Yes, here, I'm sorry, I was reading where I was. These are for first reading, right? We have 14 pieces of correspondence. Does anyone have any questions on that? Second. Yeah, that's what I have. Next item on the agenda is ordinance number 1-2018, an ordinance of the Township of Mount Olive, County of Morris, State of New Jersey, amending Chapter 285 Parks, Article 2, Vehicles in Turkey Brook of the Township Code. Mr. Ferrante.
Sure, I move for adoption and final passage, ordinance number 1-2018.
Second.
Anyone from the public wish to be heard on that? Seeing none, close to the public. Anyone from the council? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Labau?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes, ordinance number 1-2018 is passed on second reading, and I hereby direct the clerk to forward a copy of the same to the mayor and publish notice of adoption as required by law. I open the hearing to the public on ordinance number 2-2018, an ordinance of the Township of Mount Olive, amending ordinance number 26-17, which established salaries for mayor, council, department heads, supervisory personnel, and employees of the Township Clerk's Office. Ms. Labau?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption and final passage of ordinance number 2-2018.
Second.
Does anyone from the public wish to be heard?
You need a second?
Second.
We got a second. Does anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, close to the public. Anyone from council? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Labau?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Yeah, read it.
All right. Yep. Next item is ordinance number 3-2018, an ordinance of the Township of Mount Olive, County of Morris, State of New Jersey, vacating a portion of 3rd Street by the township. This will be continued to the February 13th, 2018 meeting. Next item on the agenda is ordinance number 4. An ordinance, 2018, for first reading, and with a second reading of February 13th, 2018, an ordinance of the Township of Mount Olive, County of Morris, State of New Jersey, to amend and supplement Chapter 550, Land Use, Article 6, Zoning Section 550-86, Affordable Housing in accordance with the Township's Housing Element and Fair Share Plan adopted by the Township Planning Board on December 21st, 2017, and endorsed by the Mayor and Council on January 16th, 2018, and to incorporate the terms set forth in the July 20th, 17 settlement agreement between the Township of Mount Olive and the Fair Share Housing Center. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that ordinance 4-2018 be introduced by title and passed on the first reading, and that a meeting be held on February 13th, 2018 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road in Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance. And that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second.
Does anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, close to the public. Anyone from council have anything? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Labau?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. We have 9 resolutions. Does anyone wish to present any non-consent? Seeing none, would someone make a motion to, someone, we have it here, Mr. Roman, would you move resolutions 1 through 4 and 6 through 10?
I move for approval consent resolutions 1 through 4 and 6 through 10.
Second.
Does anyone from the public wish to be heard on any? Seeing none, close to the public. Any council comments, concerns, questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Mr. Amianda, would you move the bill list, please?
I move for adoption and final passage of bill list, PDF bill list.
Second.
Does anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, close to the public. Anyone from council have any questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mr. Mania? I'm sorry. Mrs. Labow?
Mr. Lehman.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
God, good thing this is on film.
Administrative reports. Mayor, Andrew?
I do have very brief. Cabin fever reliever is Saturday, February 10th, 2018, 10 to 2 at the Senior Center. Always very well attended. I'd like the record to reflect that I have begun the process to be a town that is stigma-free. Committee is being formed. You can contact Lisa Brett in my office if you're interested in participating in the stigma-free effort on behalf of the township. Finally, in light of the recent closings of businesses in town, once again, the second time within a very short period of time, Mount Olive Township, in conjunction with Mountaintop Church, is holding a job fair Wednesday, February 14, 2018, 10 to 2 at Mountaintop Church, located at 6 Norwright Road, Hackettstown. There are over 25 businesses as of today that will be taking part in this event. The first job fair that we had was very successful, even though there was a significant snowfall that day. I expect this job fair to be even more successful. In terms of my understanding and my involvement with some of the businesses that have closed, I can tell you that Andrew and I today met with an establishment in an effort to gain their interest in development at the old Sam's Club site. I have a meeting with Senator Oroho and Tim McDonough, who is the mayor of Hope and also a marketing individual, scheduled to further see what we can do to garner interest in that site. And I have a third meeting set up with a company that we reached out to see if they have any interest in that site. I've directed Andrew to schedule a meeting with the property owner to see what they're doing in furtherance of getting a business back in that site. You know, obviously my concern is the viability of that shopping center without Sam's Club there. We are working diligently to try and find a tenant that will occupy the space and create job opportunities and synergy for the rest of the shopping center. So I think there are 4 or 5 different meetings that we have set up in a very short period of time to try and benefit the township. My understanding is that Kennedy's has closed their doors. I know that their business has suffered over the last couple of years based upon a number of different circumstances which are not necessarily economic driven. My understanding is further that there is some development thought by the owner of that property to create something of a greater economic potential at that site, including retail and a new facility which would take the existing liquor license at that site and to be utilized at that site. So I think that potential is real, and I think that the closure of Kennedy's in the short term, while certainly inconvenient to a number of different patrons, ultimately will work to the benefit of the township. The one obvious closure that I have not gotten my hands around at all at this point is Babies R Us at the trade zone, and obviously I will be reaching out to the property owner to see how the township can aid them in terms of refilling that space.
Yep, and we thank you for that. I know you're very proactive with the business, and we all appreciate that. Andrew, anything?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Any old business?
I have.
Yes, Ms. Labow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, Andrew and Mayor, for the wells or the public water that's going in over there behind Adams, an old Bud Lake Road, and then Ringenbach, and then Lucas is also included. Now, one thing you said was that homes that were affected by it, there was, I don't know that they tested every well, but you mean the lines are still going to go down the street and all the houses will hook up to it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what happens, just because I'm curious, with the wells? Where's the decommissioning? What's the process?
The wells get decommissioned at the cost of the DEP.
Of the DEP, thank you.
Yes,
That's what I
all the
wanted to
wells
know.
are going to be decommissioned, and all of the permit fees have been waived by the township. There should be no cost, as far as I know, to the homeowners
Okay.
and to
good.
the businesses that were affected.
The businesses.
And that is all being picked up by the state, obviously fronted by the municipality.
Okay, good, that's what I was wondering. And then the other question I have is, when we do have another master plan, could we also invite the Open Space Committee member there
I
as
think
well?
I did indicate that open space, and I don't know what the obligation is. There may be actually a lawful obligation to have a member of Open Space and Environmental Commission on a master plan. You have to recognize a couple things. Chuck is gone now, but 80% of Mount Olive is in the Highlands Preservation Area,
Right.
which is not going to be affected by a master plan going forward. Most of the areas in town that are either subject for development are currently being developed. So that there may be various, I don't want to say minor, but individual properties that are scattered, that are subject for development. And I'm not sure when we're ultimately going to have a new master plan, because as I said, we're pretty much limited by the state Highlands Preservation in terms of undeveloped properties in the township. In fact, as I sit here today, the only areas that are subject to further development that I can think of really relate to the trade zone, and we just recently passed a new zoning, council passed new zoning with respect to those properties, so I'm not sure when we're ultimately going to see a new master plan. It's really going to come down to not really a master plan, but what we're going to do to redevelop those areas of town which are subject to redevelopment.
One last question. I know several years ago, we had one of the employees had gone through and kind of like checked out which, like, if there was a township-owned property next to a house, you know, and contact them and said, do you want to, you know, merge them together, whatever, so it would be, are we doing anything like that to try and?
I can't say that we are, Colleen, at this point. There are individual cases that come to us from the property owner themselves, mostly in the event saying, you know what, I'd like to add additional property to my to the existing property, but it's so limited, and the township really isn't looking to shed any properties that we may own, albeit some of them are pretty small. Each of them serves a purpose in terms of forestry, in terms of water retention, in terms of overdevelopment, that we don't really at this point look to shed township-owned properties unless a property owner comes to us for a legitimate reason in terms of selling the property. It's not like we gain anything financially through it.
Not really, yeah.
We don't.
No.
We don't. And as I said, the only area of town that's left that can really be developed is on the BASF side.
Exactly.
I'm not really aware of any other large parcels of property in town that are subject to development that already aren't subject to either having built on or being built on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other old business? Seeing none, any new business? Seeing none, any legal matters?
Council President, I'll just report that, just to add to what the mayor said, the reason why you really control your own destiny now and you don't have to, a lot of towns, because they have not resolved their fair share housing issue, are driven by that from a standpoint of development, but the township's done its homework. And you're not in a situation where you're paying for this or you're at risk. And there's a number of municipalities right now sitting very much on the edge of their seat, waiting for various decisions, because that could define what the direction is with respect to development in the future. So, and also we are going forward with the tax sale foreclosures. We should have that wrapped up by mid-year, so that by the end of the year you'll be in a position those are maybe some examples of small isolated lots, as the mayor said to Ms. Laybaugh's question, that'll be put up for sale to put them back on the tax roll. But they're the small lots that the township takes by way of foreclosure. And then also, the administrator wanted me to discuss the FTC, it's called the FTC land donation. This is a small tract of land that is owned by the FTC, and the real purpose of the interest or the suggestion by the FTC to donate it was to connect to the Morris Canal. But in order to do that, one of the discussions we had with the administration was if the state is ultimately looking for this property, then the township would incur the cost of, before you acquire this, you're going to need to undertake a phase 1 environmental analysis, even though in all likelihood the property's probably okay. If you don't do that, it's at your own peril because you're not insured in the event there's any type of contamination on the property later discovered. So one of the things we wanted to discuss with you, I think at a previous meeting, it was discussed, is there an interest in this land? And the answer seemed to be yes, but on the other hand, we wanted to bring to your attention that it would likely require certain closing costs, and the estimate would be about $5,000 for that phase 1.
The administration is in favor of moving forward.
Okay. And, from there, as long as it passes the phase 1, it would be strictly a land donation. We would take title to it. And then you could decide if you want to deed that to the state.
It's land that fits into our open space that we already exist. So it's money well spent, probably come out of open space.
Yeah,
Right.
that was going to be my question.
Right. It's an open space acquisition. It certainly can.
Yeah, it helps the trails, I think, and all that whole area, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm definitely for moving
So it's
forward.
important.
Okay.
Yep, and we move forward. Ms. Lehman?
I have a question for Mr. Semro. With the properties that we foreclose on, now we have to hold those, when they go up for the tax sale, we have to hold them for 2 years before we actually foreclose?
No, we can foreclose after 6 months.
A weekend after 6 months?
These are properties which were put up for tax sale that no one bid on.
And that,
But if somebody bids on them, they have to wait 2 years?
These have already been up for tax sale that no one, in other words,
Okay.
the properties that were subject to tax sale were put up. There were a number of properties that were not bid on by the 20 or 30 people who were here for the tax sale.
So if
So
somebody were
it
to,
skews back to the township. In 6 months, we will own the properties as open space. As I said to you
Yeah.
before, there is some benefit to
yeah,
the township to
right.
even a small piece of property remaining as open space.
so just to clarify the procedure then, if somebody were to bid on it, paid the back taxes, then they have to wait 2 years before
they
they can
do.
actually
That's
foreclose?
correct.
Okay.
Right.
Now, we don't incur a quote-unquote foreclosure cost like you would as a private citizen waiting 2 years and going through all that. It's a different process.
Well, there's still a cost for us to go forward as a township and foreclose, unless somebody redeems, then they reimburse us for the cost. But when it's all said and done, we put about 20 properties on one complaint.
Okay.
And then when we foreclose, the goal is if the township evaluates such and says they want to keep it or put it up for sale, the property's owned by the township. There's no
Okay, got
other
it.
charges. So, and Rose Persante does a terrific job, staying on top of this and identifying properties where they rightly should be put up for foreclosure, and then gives us the list and gives us all the assistance we need to get it done.
And you should recognize that the properties which no one bids on are basically abandoned properties
Yeah.
that have no redeemable value to somebody who's got an interest in the property. Otherwise,
Yeah, they can't build
Otherwise
on
they-
it, they can't do anything. with it.
otherwise, the people who are in the business of buying tax foreclosures would have bid on the properties.
Yep, exactly. I just wanted to clarify, because I get those questions all the time.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, thank you, Council President.
All right, thank you. Council reports. Mr. Amianda, anything on Board of Ed or seniors?
No report from the Board of Education and no report from a senior citizen.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrante, anything on Lake Environmental or Library?
Just on the Environmental Commission, thanks to Andrew, we'll have aquatic analysts at the next meeting, which is this coming Wednesday. Next Wednesday, February 7th. So we'll have a representative there to provide some proposals for the treatment of the lake.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart, anything on economic or community action?
EDC, we met on the phone last week to just start to kick off the team with the focus on retention of businesses in the area, and then also linking that obviously up with the chamber. And the Community Action Panel, we did have a meeting on January 11th to start the planning process for a fall workshop for the community.
Thank you. Ms. Laybow, anything on open space or Board of Health?
Open Space meets on February 12th. Board of Health is a very interesting meeting, you know, first one for the year, and Dr. Michio's on the board did mention that they have a lot of flu cases coming in and really encourages everyone to wash your hands a lot, use sanitizer and everything else, because it's pretty bad out there, so.
That's what you hear.
Service
Thank you.
public announcement.
Mr. Roman, anything on Rec or Pride?
Recreation meets next week. Pride met last week. We welcomed 2 new members. And then we started the planning for new beautification efforts for the coming year, and we'll apprise as soon as more of those efforts start to materialize.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
I don't know if you've gone through all the committee reports, but I have something to say after.
We did.
Committee reports.
That was it.
Okay, I know that there was discussion at the last council meeting with regard to the water system.
Correct.
At Indian Springs. So Tim has done some research, and I called Tim up because I know that there are residents here who want to discuss this issue, and then let the residents speak on this issue. I know that I'm sure that they have comments.
All right, as you remember the last council meeting, we had some issues with the Indian Springs water system. A few of the residents were complaining about low water pressure. There were issues, there's been low water pressure up there, but there were issues also leading up to worsen the water pressure. On January 11th, we had a break. I believe it was the 13th. We had a power failure, and the 15th, my dates might be a little off, we discovered another water main break. Those were all repaired, and it took a while for the tower to fill up with water. The water pressure in that area is as it was designed. I had Gene Brzezinski and Chris Jensen, who are engineers for Van Cleef, and also Mike Latta, look into the Indian Springs water system. And the information they provided back to me, I got readings on a month's worth of the pressures coming from the well. There was an issue of possible fluctuation of the water pressure throughout on a random basis, and I'm not finding any signs of that. What we're showing is that they are on the lower pressure side of the system. The system is, just a refresher, it is the water supply is by the water tower on Camelot. It's approximately a 90-foot tower. Elevations in that area of all crests vary. You have houses well below the water tower. You have houses at the water tower level. You have houses that are actually almost the same height or a little above the base of the water tower. The higher you get as compared to where the water tower is, it's going to affect your water pressure. It's basic hydraulics, and the higher you are, the lower pressure you're going to have, because the pressure is created by the head on top of the well. As the well water goes down, people in higher elevations, their water pressure is going to go down also. So the tower is set between a level of 75 to 83 feet, which will supply the minimal water pressure to people in the higher areas, which is 20 psi, but it also prevents people from the lower elevations from having their water lines explode from extremely high pressure. There's a sensitive balance that you have to have between both areas, between high and low, or you're going to have some issues. Some areas on the low end side, which have the higher pressure, have to have reducer valves put in to keep the pressure from getting too high in the homes, while other homes with the lower pressure, many decide to put in booster pumps to boost up the water pressure in the house. I received the DEP regulations also, as you folks have had, and there's one area that is not very clear, and it's talking about the level of water pressure that's in the DEP standards says street level pressure is what we're responsible for. So basically, we are to supply no less than 20 pounds of pressure at the street level of our water system. And if you're at a higher elevation from the level of the main going into the house, as it rises up, you're going to see your pressure go down lower too as you get into the house. So we may have the 20 pounds at the street, but inside the house you might be down at 18, 15 pounds, something along those lines. The regulations state that as long as we have the 20 psi out at the curbside or out at street level. Now, street level can be confusing. Street level, you might think, is the flat surface of the road. It's kind of what I was thinking, but the engineers have informed me that it's actually referring to the level of the depth of the pipe in the street. So if the level of the pipe in the street, ours are a minimal of 4 feet down. So if it's 6 feet down, that's where the 20 psi of pressure needs to be. As you're elevating into the house, you're going to get a loss of pressure. So you're not going to have the 20 pounds inside the house. Mayor?
No, after you're done, I want to
Okay.
talk. I want to break down what you said into plain English.
I thought that was, but whatever. The reports that I got back, they're telling me the system is working as designed. Other than the 3 failures that we had leading up to this point, the system is back and running, and it's running as it is. There are options to boost water pressure. One of them is to increase the height of the tower. The other one would possibly to be putting a booster pump system in the township line. These are expensive options. You're talking anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000 as a rough estimate to have something like this done. You do something like that, then you've got the lower elevation homes that you have to be concerned about, because you'll have to go back and put reducer valves in, because their pressure is going to go up as we're trying to raise the pressure in the higher elevated homes. Several of the homes in the area have opted to put the booster pumps in their homes. I don't know that there's any issues with any of those folks. John, I'm sure you've probably talked to more of them than I have. But as far as I know, everything works fine with the booster pumps. For a residential booster pump, there is an expense involved with it. You have to purchase and have installed the booster pump, which estimates I'm getting, which you might have got something different, but I'm hearing around $500 to purchase the unit and have it installed. And then there's the electrical cost involved with actually running the booster pump every time you turn your water on. And those are basically the options. You know, I mean, the system was built to operate the way it's operating. And any changes moving forward would be a change of the original design of the system. And as the engineers are telling me, and we have spoken with the DEP and enforcement, that our system is running the way it's supposed to. So that being said, Mayor, would you like to make that English?
I'll try the best that I can. So, as I understand it, after having spoken to Tim at length about the system, and my desire to make living in Mount Olive as pleasant as I can for the residents of Mount Olive within what we can provide, my understanding is, both from Tim, Gene, and the DEP, that the system meets appropriate standards at 20 pounds per pressure, whatever it is. There is no problem technically with the system. Having gotten that information, and again, it's at the street level, the pipe level, as compared to the house level, I recognize the residents' issue in terms of low water pressure. Because God knows I wouldn't want water pressure at 18 psi or whatever is it PSI?
Yeah, PSI.
PSI, right. So I asked him, I said, well, what would it cost if we were to put in the booster pump? And Tim's response was about $400,000 on a system-wide basis. So it was certainly something which I was thinking about, but then Tim raised the issue that if you put in the booster pump to affect the people whose pressure is low, it negatively affects the people's pressure who you're now going to increase beyond what is an acceptable number. So that now you have to rectify the issue that you've created by putting in the booster pump at 400K. I had further discussions with Tim about the cost of the individual installation of a booster pump on a particular house, which Tim has obviously indicated is about $500, somewhere in that range per house, plus electric costs, which I can't imagine are overly substantial, but certainly included in the picture in terms of what a resident ultimately would have to spend. It's a unique water system that has unique problems with it in terms of elevations based upon where it is. And it's a problem which the township has provided water, from what I understand, which is acceptable to the DEP. Certainly the DEP was contacted and had no problems with the general water pressure in the system, albeit low, on the low end, and not something I would be really happy about. So we're kind of left in a quandary in terms of how the township can help the people who are at the lower end of what's acceptable, where we have an acceptable system. I don't know the answer to that question. The one thing I can tell you is that a number of residents over there, I was advised that probably someplace between 6 and 10 residents have gone the extra step to actually put in individual booster pumps. And my understanding is that when you put in the booster pump, your water pressure generally will be between 38 and 42 PSI, which, you know, from my perspective, 40 PSI is really where you want water pressure to be. I don't know a hell of a lot about water, but that's what I learned through this whole process. So having said that, having heard from Tim, I think it's time to be the residents to speak and to comment. Why don't you come up?
Mayor, before Tim, is there any part on this water system that instead of doing a booster pump that boosts the pressure for the entire system, that it only addresses those areas of a higher elevation? Like, is
we did talk about that because it's just. It would be about half the system, so you're still talking about, you would need a separate structure, you would need the booster pumps in the structure. It's some construction, it's a big expense.
How many houses do you think are affected?
Counting over in Allcrest, and over in John's area, I would say maybe 50.
Okay.
I haven't taken account,
and you would say 6 to 10 have already rectified their problem?
Yes, from what I understand, that's correct.
Right, and they would then have to remove the booster pumps that they have on their system?
Yes, yes.
Usually they would just shut it off.
So whatever, I don't know what the mechanism
Either way, yeah.
Now, so did you draw up any numbers? Is that a feasible option where we do, say half the system with a booster pump?
I would imagine that the cost would be about the same, but
basically what you're doing is you're just separating the system into two parts. Now,
Right.
you can't totally do that because it's all supplied by one water source. So
Right.
you would have to, there would be some line work doing. I have not done any engineering on it.
Increased cost.
Yeah, I imagine it would be an increased cost.
The cost is going to be what it's going to be. It's going to be, you're probably looking between $400,000 and $500,000, whether you do the whole system, whether you do half the system, because of the involvement of the lines and the way the system's laid out.
And with that, and I assume that would be an expense borne by all users of that system.
It's a water system, so it would have to be, it would be covered by the water utility, which would be all water users. It would be a capital expense, and it would be borne by the water utility.
It's cheaper to pay for, if that were what you were inclined to do, to pay for the individual booster systems on each of the 50 homes.
Right.
You'd be at
Then to go for
$250,000. But then again, you'd have to look at how it affected the township on a township-wide basis, not only on the Indian Spring water system, but the remainder of the system. It's not something that we've ever done in the past. So you'd also have to reimburse the residents who incurred the cost in the first instance.
Right, I worry about setting a precedent because this could be something that could go, say,
Pandora's
through
box.
Well, not only water
like
system,
this?
but sewer systems.
Is this the one unique, well?
No,
I think we should hear from John in terms of what he obviously has been very educated in this area. I'd like to hear what he has to say.
I appreciate all your attention. The first thing I wanted to know.
State your name, I'm sorry, your name and address.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Jonathan Backman, 6 Indian Spring Road, Bud Lake. The first thing I wanted to address was the pressure standards. It's for the main that supplies your house. And generally, people think of that as the street, because that's where the mains typically are. There is a main that runs down Indian Spring that feeds the opposite side of my street. However, my water comes from a supply behind my house. the elevation the head pressure that Tim was talking about, the elevation between my house and where the line is that supplies my house is level.
I just want to clarify that. So basically where the water main is behind your house is level to your house, or the ground surface is level to your house? Because we're going by where the actual main is.
So this is, sorry, I'm just showing Tim a picture of the rear of my house.
That's what you meant when I got here.
So, yes, the rear of my house right here where the water line comes in,
Mm-hmm.
this is generally leveled to where the water shutoff is in my neighbor's property.
Right, but then you have to go down to the location of the main.
Yeah.
It's not the surface location, it's
Yep.
where the main actually
Yep.
is.
So generally assuming that that's gonna be 6 feet down, giving another foot, that's 2.54 PSI of loss. At low ends of the day, I'm getting 15 PSI. That still doesn't meet the 20 PSI requirement.
According to the DEP, and what I'm told, and Tim can correct us, that our water system actually meets the 20 PSI level.
Yes, from what I'm being informed, yes, it does.
Okay,
And there's also.
Even with the information that John is giving to you?
Yes, well, there's also what kind of gauge are you using, what kind of gauge are we using? I mean, if it's off by a pound or two, either way, you're going to have a big difference. What we're being told, and by what I'm seeing by our tower, we're not having fluctuation in water pressure unless we're having an actual leak or power failure. The 20 PSI is at the water main level, not the surface level. So if it's 6 feet down, he's done his calculations and he's breaking down what the
Is
level
there a way that you and John can get on with the DEP and actually get the DEP to understand what the dispute is so that we can get a DEP affirmation that in fact we're at 20 PSI?
I believe that they understand what we're dealing with, but I think a good idea might be come to me, or might have my people, myself, come to John's house and meet him there. And let's go over the water line, let's go over your gauge, our gauge, let's see if there's something that's not.
If we
giving
carry
us the
this,
right
if we
information.
carry this again for 2 weeks to have that meeting, would that satisfy you at this point and bring it up again in 2 weeks so that we're all on the same page?
Yeah, that would, because when I spoke with the DEP again today, they were unaware of the line behind my house. They were told
I
about
want to get to the proper information, and so I think it would benefit actually to have the township with you on the phone with the DEP. Everybody's on the same playing field.
Well, I want to take measurements too, I want to see exactly where the main is down there. You know, we want to see exactly what's going on over there. How much loss are we getting from the main to the house and so
I
on.
think there are two issues involved here, actually. One is what is the actual PSI at the appropriate level, and number two, assuming that it meets standard or doesn't meet standard, what are the options that are available to the township to fix the problem? So obviously, if it's below standard, it's a different story than if it meets standard in terms of the township's obligation. Not saying that I'm happy with what water pressure you have to start with. So if you, unless you have something else to add at this point, my preference would be to establish a meeting at your house, get on the phone with the DEP, make sure we're all on the same page in terms of the information that we have, and bring it back up in 2 weeks again until we get resolution of the issue. Is that acceptable to you?
Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds good to me. Just one more note,
Yeah.
the fluctuating, we do measure the pressure at the, well, not we, the utility measures the pressure at the well in the tank, but the way that how far it goes throughout the day, it fluctuates. So in the middle of the day when nobody's home, I get 20 PSI on the right on it. At 7 p.m., 6 p.m., when everybody along that line comes home for dinner, turns on the water, it drops down to 15.
And I hear you, and I
So,
think that needs
just
to
wanted
be,
to
I
note
think
that.
that needs to be raised with the DEP during the discussion, so that next time we get here, everybody was on the page with the DEP, and we know where we stand in terms of what the available PSI is, and then we can talk about whether or not it meets standard, doesn't meet standard, and what the options are under both situations.
Fair enough.
Sorry, just one more thing, to decide, you know, it's separate than the engineered long-term solution. Also, I just want to make sure that the residents are being notified also when we know of these problems. You know, on the 11th, that's when we had the break and we had a drop in water pressure. What happens, my line feeds down to the rest of Smithtown, and those people are unaware that their line is getting fed from a loss of pressure.
What they need to be encouraged to do is to enroll in the Everbridge system with the township. We don't go door to door if we don't have the manpower to do so. Usually we'll do a localized calling system, like a reverse 911, but you have to be signed up for it to get it. So a lot of the problems that we have when we set out notifications is people have not signed up for this program.
I don't necessarily agree with that. We'll take a look at that issue on a town-wide basis. It's limited in terms of when those events occur, and we'll look at what we can do in terms of notification. And if it requires a man-to-man for 50 or 60 or 70 homes, then that may be something that we have to do. I think it's a good point that you've raised, and we'll look at that issue. I'm going to have Andrew actually come up with a procedure so that we meet appropriate standards in terms of notification. Obviously, we can hit a great number of the houses through the Everbridge system, but I don't think that it's necessarily the residents' obligation to enroll in the Everbridge as compared to the township's obligation and notification.
Yeah, it's in the standard.
Joe?
Mr. Owen, you have something?
Tim, what's the tank height that we try to keep it at, and what percentage of the tank is that?
We try to, the overflow point at the tank is at 83 feet. We try to keep the tank between, I think it was 75 and 82 feet.
All right, so we're pretty much near height capacity.
Yes, to get proper pressure throughout the higher elevations, we have to keep it. So all wells are programmed to keep the tower at a certain level. The times that we have issues with the actual level of the tower is when we have a leak or we got a power failure. And then the pump stop or the leak is preventing water from getting in the tower, and then we lose the head on the tower.
A couple things. Number one, although we have a 2-week period before our next council meeting, I'd like you to schedule a convenient time where you can do it next week if you can, so that give us as much lead time. I do appreciate the education that you're giving me. I appreciate your effort in terms of making sure that it's accurate, because it's really outside of the bailiwick of most of the people that sit up here, as I'm sure you can understand.
Bailiwick?
Bailiwick.
I like that.
Notwithstanding, in the meantime, we will, Andrew will take a look at the notification system, which is not homeowner responsibility, it's township responsibility. And I'd like to get some feedback as soon as possible in terms of your understanding and your understanding of the DEP issues specifically related to where your pipe is and the water pressure on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely.
So that next week we can actually make some progress on this issue rather than, I think we did make some progress, but I'd like to see more.
It's not resolved.
No, it's not resolved, and water is one of the most important functions that we provide to residents. So we need to figure out what's going on, what our obligation is, and how we can fix even at 20 PSI. You know, the bottom line is, at the end of the day, if you're at appropriate numbers, it's probably going to be based upon the overall township. I can't see the township coming in and putting in an individual booster pump on your system if you're at appropriate levels. If you're not at appropriate level, I think that we obviously have an obligation to come up with a fix with your particular house and anyone who is similarly situated. And that's gonna, we're gonna have to talk about what that is.
Ms. Leba?
Thank you, Mr. President. What I don't understand, the 20 PSI, okay, that's supposed to be the lowest you're supposed to have.
That's minimal, yeah.
That's minimal.
That's acceptable.
And that's acceptable, but why isn't it 20 PSI at the busiest times of the day instead of the slowest times?
It should be a minimum of 20 PSI at any point in the day. It shouldn't fluctuate below 20 PSI. It should be always above 20 PSI. And if we're not supplying, the problem here is where you measure the 20 PSI in terms of the township's obligation. So that's what they need to really understand is, are there houses on the system which are not getting what is required by law? And if they're not getting what's required by law, it's pretty simple that we have an obligation to fix that problem, whatever the fix may be.
But I mean, it's got to be 24/7. I mean, that's...
It's 24/7, the minimal.
Yeah,
it should never, absent a service issue,
right,
it should never dip below 20 PSI.
Exactly.
And so I have no problem with any fix of a water system absent a break where you have a water main break, and obviously your water pressure can go down to 0 and it gets fixed, and it should go back above what is statutorily required of the township.
The other question I have,
I'm sorry, so we need to figure out exactly what the issue is at your house and similarly situated or worse situated houses. That's why I think meeting between Tim and his people and you on the phone with the DEP saying, this is our understanding, and you're gonna come back and say, that's not the case. This is where the level of the pipe that feeds my system is, and I don't get 20 PSI, and have the DEP take a look at it and say, John, you're right, it's not appropriately situated, and you should be getting some help from the township.
I'll be seeing the G. Brzezinski's there, Mike Latta, and I'm going to see if I can get the DEP there in person also.
Whoever needs to be there, so that the next time that we come back, we're not arguing over where you're measuring the appropriate PSI level, and everyone's on the same page. That's what we need to be, so we can look at what other issues we need to address on the water system.
One last question that I have, when you talk about you discovered there was another leak. How are you discovering leak? Is it an alarm that goes off, or how is it discovered?
There is a low pressure alarm on the system that if there is a leak, when the tower gets to a certain level, the alarm will go off.
Okay.
This we realized the first leak happened. So that got repaired. We had the power outage, so at that point we lost the head in the tower because of the power outage. By the time we got generators in place, it was a fight to get it back up. It wasn't gaining as, there's a certain time period that we know this is going to gain, and we were not gaining as quickly as we realized, so that's when we go looking for another leak, and we found it by the Sancho well house.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's 100% accurate in this particular case. I think it was kind of anecdotal that we started hearing from people in that water system that their pressure was lower than normal.
Oh, I agree. I think that
and I contacted Tim and I said, what's going on with the Indian Springs water system? And Tim went out and looked and came to the conclusion that there was a system failure in some respect.
This has been a low pressure area for a long time. I mean, it's nothing new. Basically, back from the design of the system, that's just the way it was built. But again, if he's getting below 20 PSI, then something has to be done, and we need to rectify the situation.
Yeah, but by the same token, I think that the people on that system have long recognized that they're at a low water, and they recognize in this particular instance that they were lower than low water, and I think it was anecdotal, because I remember the conversation I had with Tim. Someone contacted me on Facebook. It may have actually been Paul, who ran for council and sat on council. Paul. Remember Paul?
Stefano?
Paul Stefano, I think, contacted me, lives in that area, said, what's going on with the water pressure? I said, let me find out. Called Tim. Tim went out and looked and said, yeah, you know what, we found a water leak ultimately. So that's the way that ultimately we find out about a lot of water pressure. It's the residents who first notice that they have reduced water pressure, and ultimately the safeguards that we have in place come on after the residents have already noticed the change in their water pressure.
Yeah, that's what's really important for the residents to reach out to us, because a lot of stuff we don't know.
They always do.
That's good.
Well, when you have really low water pressure.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks, we'll have a better picture exactly of where we're going.
Tim, could you send any reports that are finally, once you have any reports, whether they're preliminary in nature, if you could send it to us?
Okay.
I'll actually have Andrew update the entire council.
Yeah, please.
Tim will report to Andrew, and you'll get whatever information has been. And you know what, when you have the meeting with the DEP, Andrew should be involved in the meeting as well.
He'll be there.
Okay. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none? Oh,
Nope.
I'm sorry. State your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Robert and my last name is spelled O-S-Z-U-S-T, and I'm at 307 Kings Arrow Road. I apologize, I wanted to see if anyone else from Indian Spring was going to speak before I came up. I just had a couple of questions. First of all, Mr. Fronte, you said that there was someone from an aquatics committee to come talk about a lake?
Yep.
Because I was aware that before the winter came and froze over the lake, there was a problem with algae causing toxicity of the lake. I was just wondering, when was that team coming, and when were their findings going to be distributed?
So the aquatic analysts will be there on Wednesday. 7 o'clock, the meeting's in the conference room down the hall.
February 7th.
February 7th, what did I say?
I don't know, I'm just asking. You
Oh, yes,
said
February
Wednesday,
7th.
not Wednesday, tomorrow, Wednesday.
Not tomorrow, next Wednesday, February 7th.
And that's where?
In the conference room down the hall here.
Just so you're aware, that my understanding is that the last testing which was done actually resulted in the DEP lifting any restrictions with respect to the lake, that the toxicity issue related to the algae had been resolved, whether it be seasonal or otherwise, treatment-wise, that issue had been resolved.
Yes, I was more hoping for a solution coming up that wouldn't cause any recurring. I realized that when the winter season came around, it was really nice to see as many people as there were enjoying the frozen lake, and I'm sure that with the lake thawed, I would like to see an equal number, if not more, enjoying the lake when it's liquid.
Yeah, I'm not sure that ultimately the issue with the lake was necessarily seasonal. I don't know for certain. What I can tell you is that this year, in the budget which is going to be approved, we are running a beach program which will result in daily testing of the water. I'm not sure what the testing protocol was when we weren't running a beach program. So there's going to be a lot more daily focus on what's happening at the lake going forward than there was this year.
May I ask what else is entailed with the beach program?
In terms of the hiring of lifeguards, the purchase of equipment, it probably will be run, in past years we've run it from sometime in June through Labor Day.
No, mid-August, before Labor Day.
Mid-August?
Yeah, because the lifeguards go back to school.
Oh, the lifeguards go back to school. There will be a cost involved. I think that the cost for a seasonal pass to use the beach is somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $25 for, I think was it a family? I don't know.
$5 for kids or something?
Yeah.
For the whole season.
Yeah, for the whole season.
Cover part of the cost of the operation of the beach. It's a relatively low fee.
Is there a day-to-day fee as well?
There is, if you want to use it on a day. I think it's $5.
That's good. I'm sorry, I come from Forest Lakes in Andover, and one of the downfalls, I think, of their beach system is that they don't have day-to-day passes, and it precludes a lot of what I think is revenue to the private owners of the lake, and also it makes the community a bit more secluded.
There is a daily fee. I know it's $5, and the seasonal fee is
$20.
Ridiculously cheap compared to the daily fee.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's $20 or $25.
Good. One of the questions I was going to come up here to say was wondering what we were going to do about the lake, but it's good to know that that meeting's there, and I'll try my best to make it.
Swim lessons and everything there, Robert. You're going to have swim lessons for the kids?
That would be nice.
Kayak rentals.
Yeah, a lot of activities.
Different types of activities.
Also, just in regards to the Indian Springs and the watering system, I was wondering why there wasn't a mailing system set up in order to notify people of leaks. I only say this because I'm sure those people are paying for their water, and I'm sure their bills normally come through the mail, and I don't see any reason that the same way that they pull money from people, they can't notify people in the same way.
I don't think it's quite that easy. I don't think that necessarily the billing that is done for the township through the water systems is based upon where you get your water from, that it's an overall billing system. Again, I've put Andrew in charge of coming up with a system of notification that will not be customer-driven, but township-driven in terms of notification.
Yes.
I totally agree with John on that particular issue, that, you know, although Tim talked about the Everbridge system, which is really the most effective way to get information out from the township in terms of push, if you choose not or don't know about the system, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be notified of any potential issues in the water system. So we will figure that out going forward. Sometimes it's easier to fix problems once they've been identified than to identify problems before they occur, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm hopeful to see that system in place soon, Andrew, because I feel bad that the full resolution of this problem will have taken roughly 5 to 6 weeks, because I know that you just asked for a meeting of the DEP on John's Land a week from today.
It's not really the time frame. I don't know that that's 100% accurate in terms of the time frame. The notification issue was when the system was down until the system was fixed. It's not necessarily from when it was first identified through today.
I'll be happy to see the resolution.
As will I.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, close to the public. Any council comments? Mr. Amianda?
Yes, on a positive side, I wanted to comment on township's budget for this year. I just wanted to know everybody here to know that the 2018 budget hearing on January 27 went very well, and I thank the mayor and staff for their hard work in putting together the budget.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrante?
Nothing tonight.
Ms. Leba?
Nothing, thank you.
Ms. Stewart?
Ryan, good luck. Thanks for coming.
Oh,
Mr.
yeah.
Roman?
He's so quiet.
I have
didn't-
nothing.
And I have nothing. Thank you all. Good luck, Ryan. Do we have Robert?
Robert,
Robert.
not
Robert?
Ryan,
Ryan,
Robert.
Robert.
I was there, but do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all for coming.
Do you want to take the ordinance?